Hey everybody, today is Monday, July 19th, 2021. Coming up on the show today, from Marvel's Loki, editor Paul Zucker.
Once in a while, Kevin Feige on a call will say something about Doctor Strange, or we'll go, ooh, and it's very tantalizing, but you almost don't want to know too much because we're fans.
Editor Emma McCleave.
You know that there are things that they're focusing on for other shows. You can just tell, you can just feel it, but nothing is ever particularly explicit. It's like Paul says, the secrecy is very real and everybody respects it.
And editor Calum Ross.
Immediately you're thrust into a world where the people around you are phenomenal. Our post-viz team, you could immediately jump on them and be like, oh, I really would love a shot where, it's a bird's eye view, the meteorite comes through shot, and then you have it.
Yes, all that and a lot more on this episode of The Rough Cut. Okay, let's get to it. Time for a double shot of Marvel magic. Yes, that's right. Last week, we had editors Lee Folsom Boyd and Matthew Schmidt on to talk about Black Widow. And that film absolutely blew up in theaters and on Disney+. No shock there, and good for them. But this week, we are very fortunate to talk with the editors of the Marvel series Loki, which just wrapped its first season, its first 6-episode season a few days ago. Loki was fantastic. I loved it. I know a lot of people loved it. And I'm very excited to dig into the editorial backstory of that show. To help us do that, we have all very talented editors from the series, Paul Zucker, Calum Ross, and Emma McCleave, each one bringing to the table so much from their respective backgrounds in comedy and drama and action sci-fi. For Paul and Calum, this is their first foray into the Marvel Cinematic Universe, but Emma assisted on a bunch of Marvel movies, including working with one of last week's guests, Black Widow editor Matthew Schmidt. Talk about your multiverses. Paul, Calum, and Emma all came together to edit a series that once again surprised and even surpassed expectations of fans. And I have to give a special shout out to Calum Ross, who, during the course of our interview, must have moved around to every corner of the Scottish Highlands trying to get a good internet signal. Regardless, Loki is a terrific series. Doesn't matter if you're a Marvel fan or not. In spite of that, like all Marvel properties, it not only stands on its own, but plays a pivotal role in the larger superhero saga. And we will get into all that right after we learn a little bit about some of the folks who graciously sponsored this talk with Team Loki. Let me ask you, how would you like to have the superpower of being able to move massive amounts of media around the world quickly and as efficiently as a snap of Thanos' giant fingers? Well, you can. Just like the Avengers, all you need is a little help from some very powerful friends. And those friends call themselves MASV Massive. Yeah, that's how it's spelled. It is their mission to solve your most challenging media problems. Namely, how to easily, safely, and efficiently share all that bandwidth-busting high-res media you shoot. Their pay-as-you-go model means you only pay for what you need, and there are no limits to the size of the file you can share. You can send uncompressed videos to teams all around the world, alternate universes included, and speed up your production cycle. And if you sign up today at massive.io/theroughcut, you just put a couple of dashes in there between the rough and cut, you can get 100 gigabytes free towards your transfer. No fooling. I will put a link in the show notes to make it easy for you, but once again, that's massive, massive.io/theroughcut for 100 gigabytes free towards your transfer. And now that you have access to the very best way to share media amongst your production team, make sure that you have the very best in production audio to share as well. And for that, you can turn to our friends at Extreme Music. For over 20 years, yes, I said 20, they have been providing content creators in the film, TV, and gaming industries with amazing music created by the top names in the production and composing game. Just visit their website, extrememusic.com, and do a quick keyword search on just about every aspect of music to find just what you need. Their deep catalog is available to you to customize right down to the instrumentation of the track so that you get just what you want in a way that suits your story best. It is free to try, it is fun to do, and it is the very best way for you to ensure that your project sounds great. You can do it all online, all by yourself, or with the help from one of their representatives in an office all around the world near you. So don't wait. The next time you have a great story to tell, visit Extreme Music and give your show or movie the gift of great music. Oh man, so much to talk about with Loki. I think you're going to love this one. Enjoy! Here are Paul Zucker, Emma McCleave, and Calum Ross.
It's hard to find you. Imagine all the job offers you're not getting right now.
Yeah, jeez. Well, that's why the phones can't be ringing. That's the reason.
Yeah, that's it.
So Emma, I know you've got plenty of Marvel in your credits. I think I can figure that out. Maybe we should start with Paul. Paul, you've got a pretty diverse background in both film and TV, but nothing about big action sci-fi type stuff that really jumped out at me. So how was it that you got this particular gig, and what was it about you and your experience that you think got you the job?
Yeah, I kind of wondered myself, man. Let's ask Kate, but she's not here. I came to this job through my agent. I had a meeting with John Goldsmith, who runs post for streaming for Marvel. He told me about the Loki project, and then I met Kevin and Kate and Kevin Wright, the creative producer on the show, at the same time. And then I got the job. You're right, I didn't have extensive action, big budget, or visual effects experience. I had some of each one. But in meeting with Kevin and Kate and talking about what they saw for the show, we found out that we had a lot of things in common. I think that when I walked into the meeting room, they had all of their kind of reference art, clip art up on the walls, and there was a lot of Eternal Sunshine of the Spotless Mind. And I walked in and I said, I think I know why I'm here, because I worked on that picture. I was an additional editor. And we talked a lot about that film, and it was a reference for them, especially in episode 1. And I think that my comedy experience, I spent a couple of years doing comedy before I came to Marvel, experience with dialogue, I think they saw as an asset. I mean, I'm kind of speculating here, but I went in very nervous, kind of saying, yeah, I don't have a lot of action experience. I've done a couple of things. I did this picture, Hotel Artemis, that had a bunch. And they said, don't worry about that. We were talking about character and theme and tone. And then I assumed because I have some experience in TV and in film, and I was going to be doing, I didn't know it at the time, but they already knew they wanted me to do the first 2 episodes. So there's a certain amount of setting the tone involved in the work. And of course, that's what you do on every movie, unless it's a sequel. I mean, you're really setting the tone.
And for you, Calum, I noticed you have a lot of comedy experience, and there is definitely a wry comedic undertone in this series. I think your connection here might be Loki director Kate Herron and your experience together on the series Sex Education. So I'm just going to assume that was the case. And if so, what were the specifics around you getting this job, and what did Kate say to you about what she was looking for and what she wanted to do with the series?
I mean, for me, yeah, you're right. The Sex Education was the link that landed me, really. I'd worked with her on that, and then, we'd sort of texted here and there, after we finished on it. And then when she announced that she had landed Loki, I texted her immediately and was like, that's, incredible. That's amazing. Congratulations. And then sort of a few days later, I just thought to myself, well, what have I got to lose? I'll text her again and say if there are opportunities to work on it or work with you again, I would jump at the chance. And then like 3 weeks went by and I hadn't heard anything. And then I get a text saying, tell your agent to expect a call from Marvel. And, it was just unbelievable. So like Paul, I had a chat with John, which was more of a logistics call. Do you want to come to America? What we do with your family come with you? That kind of thing. And I was like, I'll do anything. We're happy coming. Whatever works for Marvel works for me.
What family? It's all about Marvel, sure.
Yeah, absolutely. So then I had a chat with Kevin Wright and Kate, and they basically just filled me in on the series, what they were, hoping to do with it. And then the big test was to meet Victoria Alonso. She was going to be in London. So we met for breakfast, and I rewatched every Marvel movie in preparation. And that was, the most lovely breakfast I could have had. We just chatted about, how I got into the film industry and that kind of thing. And then a few days later, my agent phoned saying, yeah, you nailed that and job's yours. So that's kind of how it came about for me.
Well, Paul, you mentioned Eternal Sunshine. Were there other shows or films that were used as points of reference for the tone of what they were going for with Loki?
I remember having a conversation with Kate where she was talking a bit about Zodiac and is it Children of Men as well?
Yeah.
Those films. So I revisited those ones. I definitely went back and watched those, the investigation in Zodiac and all that sort of stuff. And I just listened to what I was being told was the stuff she was interested in, and I had a look, yeah.
Yeah, I had a couple of scenes in episode 2 especially that were directly referencing 7, so I took a look at those. Fincher was talked about Zodiac and 7 in terms of framing and composition a lot for Autumn, the cinematographer, and for Kate. So I took a look at those just to see what they were up to. One obvious one maybe for the Time Theater in episode 1 is just Defending Your Life. I don't think it was a stylistic reference, but the device of watching scenes from your own life was a pretty obvious reference. I didn't go back and watch the movie. I'd seen it. I know that like back of my hand. But that was a fun one.
Okay, Emma, as our lone Marvel vet, having done a lot of assisting on features like Avengers, Age of Ultron, Thor, The Dark World, let's see, Captain America, First Avenger, and I think Guardians of the Galaxy. Tell us about not just getting on Loki, but being an editor for your first time on a big Marvel project.
I mean, I definitely came to the project because of my previous experience with Marvel. My first job with them was the first Captain America, and that was when they were smaller. You had different, like it was just slightly different in that, well, I mean, on this show, we obviously had COVID, but it's like I met Kevin, Lou, and Victoria right at the start on that show as an assistant editor, and Victoria particularly I got to know. And then over the next few years, every time they came to London, because I work from London, I got the call. Basically, would you like to meet the editor? Would you like to join us again? And so when I started to move towards editing, I just kept them informed. Every now and again, I'd send them an email and say, this is what I'm doing now, and this is who I've just worked with, or this is what I've worked on. And they paid attention. To be honest, I've seen over the years other people come up with Marvel. I've seen that happen in visual effects. I've seen that happen in editing. I've seen, if they've worked with someone they like, I've seen them give them more opportunities. So when you see that, it offers hope, and it makes you want it and work hard for it, actually. So as I started to move up, I kept them informed. And one day I got an email which was just, we have an idea for you. And then I went through the same process, basically. I met with John Goldsmith and chatted with him. And then I met with Kate and Kevin Wright and chatted with them. And then I had the show. So I was really fortunate. I came up, I feel that I've come up with them, basically. So yeah, it's very fortunate.
Well, in just the short amount of time that we've already been talking, it seems like that your advice might be, Calum, you said, what have you got to lose? And, Emma, that persistence really pays off. It seems like your advice would be just to keep at it and just let them know what your intentions are and, what you want to do.
I just figure if I didn't say it out loud, who knows? Who knows? Like no one, if you don't say what you want, no one knows what you want. If you don't say what you're doing, people won't necessarily know what you're doing. I'm based in London, so I have to tell people what I'm doing in America if I want to work with Americans. And I wanted to work with Marvel again, so I told them. Yeah.
Well, Paul, we talked about Marvel being kind of a new thing for you, but something that's not new to you is developing a pilot, as you did here on Loki. You also did for Silicon Valley.
Right.
And you talk to editors all the time about how challenging it is to do a pilot because you have so much world building to do, so much context setting the tone and the style of the show. Mm-hmm. And as far as the story goes, you're literally branching off from the Marvel timeline from Avengers Endgame. Mm-hmm. So your pilot starts with a cut down of the scene of Loki escaping in Endgame. Right. How did that all play out here? Did you have access to Jeff Ford and Matt Schmidt's avid projects from Endgame? Were you cutting down from just the master file of the movie? So much to talk about there, so I'm just going to shut up and let you flesh it out.
Well, so this wasn't a pilot in the classic sense that we're starting cold. In other words, you said the pilot for Silicon Valley, there was no pre-existing material. That was the first time those actors were ever playing those characters. Here, and really almost any Marvel project to a degree, we're all stepping into a continuum. It's already in progress in a way. This one, we're picking up the next second after Endgame, In some ways, that's like a sequel, right? So I had something to reference. So in terms of Tom's performance, it was very important to know that we were in 2012. This was a 2012 version of Loki, not Ragnarok Loki. So knowing that, familiarizing myself what that performance felt like in Avengers informed the performance choices I made in episode 1. And then as far as having material available to me from other MCU films, yeah, we all had that. We all had every film available to us. Now, in episode 1, I think was special because in the Time Theater, we have so many clips from other films. So those films, a lot of those scenes were scripted. It was kind of loosely scripted. There was a lot more, for instance, than wound up in the final cut. But it said, this scene from Dark World, they watch it, or he watches his own death and stuff. So not only did we get those films, but we got those scenes, and we got the dailies bins. So I'm looking at Jeff Ford and Matt Schmidt's dailies. I'm not looking at their edits, but I'm looking at the raw footage. And early on in that stuff, we were encouraged to look for alternate angles and play those scenes in a different way. There was some worry that it was going to be a clip show and that we were just going to be showing stuff that people have already seen. So we kind of experimented with that a little bit, and we didn't do too much of that, but that was available to us. So yes, I had dailies for all of those films, which was exciting as hell to be in Jeff Ford and Matt Schmidt's bins, and, you know.
Yeah, well, Emma knows all about that. You know, Calum, I was teasing you a little bit about leaving the family behind, but were you all in Atlanta together at Marvel Camp, as I call it, at the same time with WandaVision and the Falcon and the Winter Soldier crew?
No, they were. I think they were all kind of there and thereabouts. Yeah.
Well, from what I recall from talking to the other shows, all three shows were somewhat isolated from one another for security reasons, and I would also assume for pandemic reasons. But were all of your avids connected together as part of a larger Nexus storage config throughout the site, or was each post team kind of self-contained in its own environment?
Emma's laughing because I'm like the least technical editor on the planet, I think. So, you know, when it comes to sharing platforms and all that kind of stuff, these guys know a lot more about, you know, I think we were all on the same server and we could access each other's projects, but no, we couldn't jump onto anything from any of the other Marvel shows.
All right, Calum, I'll give you another one, this time a lot less technical.
Give him a really easy one.
I promise this one's going to be so simple, it's going to be ridiculous. You know, but something that's a little different about Loki, and in fact, all the Marvel series released so far, is that there is one director throughout the run of the season, whereas most shows have a showrunner or showrunners and then multiple directors throughout the season. Or maybe that's just a Hollywood thing, and in the UK, it's more common for there to be one director. But how does that affect you as an editor who is part of an editing team when you have one director? Does it help in terms of continuity and the director being a common touchstone between all the editors? Or maybe the director has less time to communicate and work with you? What's your takeaway on that?
It's a little of all of it, right?
Yeah, a little bit. You know, sometimes you feel you're grappling for time. Other times it's great because you get a chance to really dig into something without, you know, too much kind of, I don't know if interference is the right word to use when it comes to the director having a say. But, you know, there are times where you know, really need an opinion and you're sort of waiting around for it. And there are other times where you're feeling like you're making really good headway because you're not sort of being sent in a different direction and then a different direction again. And, you know, you can stay focused on where you think things should go at that time. So, there's definitely swings and roundabouts when it comes to one director the whole way through.
It's easier on us than it is on the director.
Yeah.
Frankly. Kate, I mean, it was inhuman what she had, the load that she had to carry. That's 6 hours of material, all in various stages. I mean, at times she was writing scripts in pre-production, production, and post-production all at the same time, which is not that uncommon in television, but to have the scope of this show, the budget of this show, the visual effects shot count of this show in one director's hands is pretty uncommon. So her time is so highly scheduled and get sliced into half-hour increments. So we would roughly know when we would get her. And that would be really helpful because we'd be working towards that deadline to have stuff to present. And that's the only way it could work with all of the requirements on all of us, but especially on her time. From VisFX meetings to sound meetings to music meetings to creative review sessions to editing sessions with the three of us. But yeah, a lot of times we were left on our own while she was working with Emma for, you know, on episode 6 for hours at a time. And we had pressing concerns, you know, we need to get this visual effects shot approved and get in line, you know.
There were definitely moments when Calum and I ran quite a parallel path with a lot of what we were doing because we were he was 3, I was 4, he was 5, I was 6. So 3 and 4 had similar deadlines, and then 5 and 6 had similar deadlines. And I honestly wouldn't have put it past myself the number of times I went into his room and I was like, I need her for half an hour. When do you have her? You know, just so that I need them. Like her and Kevin Wright. It was like, how do I get them? I need them. Yeah. When can I have her?
With that as well, you know, despite her having such a huge amount of information in her mind, nothing ever got past her. You could change a few frames here and there and think, yeah, that's better. And then she'd be like, something changed with that cut. And you'd be like, I thought I could get away with that.
Yeah.
Well, it's too late now. The show's done. But in terms of you all working together, were you able to collaborate and communicate on a regular basis, or were you somewhat heads down and separated on each individual episode that you were working on?
I think we had a pretty open door environment, to be honest. We were really fortunate to be working at the studio together during this period of time. And so, if I wanted to talk to Paul or I wanted to talk to Calum, it was very easy just to access them, basically. Yeah, I think we actively engaged in talking to each other. Nothing necessarily formal, but it was regular and it was easy. And it was because we had the benefit, unlike many people this last year, of working in the same environment together, I would say.
Yeah, for my part, I've worked in multiple editor situations, and I've had good experiences, and I've had something less than that. And I came to this one, I tried to have as little ego about my work as possible. So I would share all of my early stuff with these guys, and it was invaluable to just have somebody to bounce it off of, to talk to. The director and creative producer were very busy in production on set. I really wanted to take that opportunity. So for my part, I shared as much as I could. And, a certain amount of that we sort of have to do because, or I had to do at least, because in episodes 1 and 2, I was getting music feedback. We were setting the tone of the temp score first. I was sharing what the director was responding to with these guys. In terms of sound effects, we were designing things like that. As things were coming together, we were putting together bins going, these are the sound effects we're liking, and this is what Skywalker Sound is sending us, and I'm getting good feedback on this, try this, and we're temping with this, try that kind of thing. So it's sort of required, really.
I think as a team, it was a phenomenal team, and I'd love to work with these guys and with Marvel again for sure.
Yeah, we had a blast, and it's not a given. In multiple editor situations, it's not a given. There can be a competitive environment. Everybody's trying to do their best work, and they want to get hired again. They want to be noticed. They want to impress the director. You don't necessarily know each other enough to trust each other, but all that was very easy on this one, and there was a lot of laughs, and it felt really comfortable sharing work, rough cuts, really early cuts with these guys.
It was also hugely validating working together, I think. Like, we were able to look at each other's work and, buoy each other up, but also talk about what we were doing in a scene, and if we couldn't quite see what we needed to see, and we were collaborative in that sense, and there was no competition and there was no egos, and we laughed a lot, is what I would say. Like, we had a really nice time together. We laughed a lot. Like, it was really fun. It was a really fun way to spend many months in a very weird year.
We were on these visual effects review calls, or whatever review calls. There was a lot of them, and they were a daily operation. But we had massive text chains going the whole time where we're laughing, commenting, making inside jokes, trying to crack each other up on Zoom calls with Kevin Feige.
Secret code
and we're having to turn her camera off and pretend that there's an internet issue because she's laughing so hard, stuff like that.
What's the worst is when you start laughing and you turn off your camera, and then someone asks you a question and you immediately have to compose and turn it back on. We had it, it was definitely. It was pretty hilarious, actually.
I think our whole team, not just these two guys, but all our assistants, I had Jess McCleave and Josh, and they were phenomenal as well. Everyone just got on so well, and everyone, you could almost, certainly these two and Jess and Josh for me are friends for life after this show.
Yeah, and the collaboration is at the very heart of what an editor does, and really what all filmmakers do. But personally, the journey towards being a better collaborator has been one of more openness and more generosity and less ego. And that's been an evolution for me, and I've become happier, a better collaborator, and a better editor for it. And actually having a larger team, an exponentially larger team like we do on a Marvel show, creates a lot of opportunity for that, because there's a lot more collaborators. And maybe in the beginning it's a little intimidating because there's so many new departments. But ultimately you just kind of relax a little bit and let go a little bit and create good boundaries, and you're speaking with conviction about your opinions on how it should go. But you have to be a good listener in these environments, and people are very sensitive to it too. And we know if somebody's not a good listener.
I stayed in Atlanta for quite a while, and so I had my core team of assistants, Sal and Sarah, who were my two assistants who sort of carried through most of the show. We also had Lorena Taupin join us in Atlanta, but we had this team of assistants in Atlanta as well, because then we traveled back to LA, who sort of set the show up for us, and a bunch of seconds there who worked on the show, Joe and Ivan and Andrea, and they were incredible. And sort of led by post supervisor Jen Bergman. In LA we had Megan Zerto. And I have to say, the collaboration between that whole team, both in Atlanta and in Los Angeles, because I wasn't with the guys the whole time, actually. I was in Atlanta for slightly longer. It was pretty phenomenal. What a lucky show to have been on.
Yeah, I mean, I would say as a whole, working for Marvel, that just, it was such a pleasure. And all the way from bottom to the top, there was no egos. You had a voice from the beginning, and it was just such a joy.
Well, having spoken previously with the editors of both WandaVision and The Falcon and the Winter Soldier, the message that these shows are approached more like short features has come through loud and clear, especially from Zine Baker, who worked on both Marvel shows and features, in this case Thor Ragnarok and WandaVision. But Emma, how would you compare your experiences on the two, and what's your take on Loki being more of a 6-part feature than an episodic series?
I definitely agree with that. I definitely feel that it's very much a 6-part feature.
Yeah.
It definitely, it didn't feel that different, to be honest, to the features that we do. The visual effects were the same, the expectations were the same, the quality of what we were receiving in the cutting room was the same, whether that be cinematography, costumes, makeup, lighting, production design, all of it was the same. And as soon as that starts coming in, it's no small thing, is what it felt like as soon as we started getting dailies. And the scripts, everything, actually, the writing and everything we were getting, it just felt the same, to be honest, as a Marvel film. It didn't feel different to what we got in on other shows that I've been on. And so I think all of us were in with the expectation that that's what we were doing. We were doing mini features. All of us were doing mini features.
And the level of collaborators that you get to work with. I mean, to pull one named Dan DeLue, who's our visual effects supervisor, who is a massive, massive part of the success of this show. I mean, he was a visual effects supervisor for Infinity War and Endgame. I mean, that's the level of collaborators that we get to work with, is one of the greatest parts of working on something of such a big budget.
Well, Calum, how much of a culture shock was it for you to work on such a VFX-heavy type show? I mean, these are such big shows with a big machine and a lot of very seasoned, talented people working on the show. For you working on smaller shows, working in television previously that was more comedy and drama, was there sort of a shock to your system on this show?
Oh, I think without a doubt it was a shock, coming from the shows that I'd done in the past and the sort of the budgets involved and the support involved in those. Although it was great, this was, a massive step up, I would say. And, immediately you're thrust into a world where the people around you are phenomenal. And, you get a scene in and immediately you start thinking creatively about how you can use the people around you. And, our post-viz team, you could immediately jump on them and be like, oh, I really would love a shot where, it's a bird's eye view, the meteorite comes through shot, and then you have it. And, the next day it's in your cut. I was kind of amazed that I was able to enter that world so smoothly because I, haven't been part of that before.
I think the point to do with collaborators is a really good one because, we had these really strong, amazing, apart from our assisting team and each other and that we could lean on, we also had these a post-viz team we could lean into. VFX, couldn't have been more accessible, more ready to answer our questions, more ready to help us to see the scope of what we could do and what we could achieve within a shot. And then we had these incredible music editors come on. And we had Natalie in the mix and we had Skywalker. We had a lot of resources at our disposal that I don't know that you necessarily get in your in most TV shows, which, you can't not be grateful for and feel lucky for. And it all just helps elevate everything.
Yeah.
It's really exciting. It's really exciting.
Yeah. Creatively speaking, there are differences from how a film would be run. Let's say we were all working on Loki, the movie. and 3 of us were editing, we'd probably be passing some scenes back and forth. I mean, I assume that didn't really happen here. I think we helped out, we pitched in a little bit when another editor needed something, but for the most part, we worked on our own episodes, and that's pretty standard in episodic. Whereas in a feature, it might be more commingled, depending. So that was different than perhaps a feature.
Well, going back to the challenge of setting up the pilot and setting the context of the story and, getting all that explanation stuff out of the way in episode 1, for the first time we meet Miss Minutes. And not only does this get a lot of explanation out of the way, it's done in a fun, cartoonish kind of manner with a throwback vibe that really permeates throughout the whole show.
Yeah.
So are pieces like that, the Miss Minutes intro, just handed over to you as finished elements, or is it something that you as a team were able to edit and even develop?
Maybe I'll jump in because Miss Minutes is in episode 1 where we meet her, talking about the animated cartoon, where the kind of propaganda video where she lays out what the TVA is all about. That was an interesting one because it was scripted, obviously. That script changed up until the last minute. It was written and rewritten as we figured out what the exposition needed to be and how we wanted to say it. A lot of pressure on that one because we were laying out some rules for the multiverse that are going to be, relevant for the next how many films and TV shows. And, that was very exciting to be on the ground level of that kind of stuff, those kind of conversations. Kate knew she wanted to do a cartoon there. But beyond that, there wasn't a lot of direction. There was no art for that, as I recall. So when I called her up and said, what are you imagining here? And beyond a cartoon and some tonal notes about keeping it in the mid-50s, 60s vibe of the TVA, we were kind of on our own. So together with my assistants, Drew Kilcoyne, who was the first AE, and Carrie Israel, who was the second, and they pitched in a ton on this one in particular, we created that out of stock footage. We created that out of Disney live-action short films from the mid-50s, Ames Office films from the early 60s, UPA cartoons, and cobbled together for a couple other sources that we found. And it was temped with things like Bernard Herrmann scores that featured the theremin from The Day the Earth Stood Still, and sound effects and scratch track recorded by assistants. And we put it together. And I, for one, thought it was good enough to put on the air. Like, I really liked it as a creative decision. I thought, like, if we don't go in the cartoon road, we could do this. Ultimately, that became the blueprint, though, for what you see in the episode, which was hand-drawn animation. So that was kind of signed off on as a general direction and tonal direction. And then that was turned over to visual effects and the animators who guided the animation process. So what we would get back eventually were storyboards. Those were laid, I would lay those into the cut. Those didn't have any motion to them really, but those would be laid against the cut. And then we would have a creative review session where everybody sort of, okay, yes, well, that sounds good. Let's have that. But what about this here? I would modulate maybe performance, speed, tone, stuff like that a little bit, but a lot of meetings to lock that in. And then that was given to the animators to animate too. And at that point, you can't change it because it costs $1 billion a second or something. And that was a real buzzer beater. That one came down to the last second.
I think I actually accidentally was in one of those meetings one time, like the conversation moved there and I was suddenly like, oh my gosh, what's going on? I was so involved and
heavy multiverse talk, the logic, the laws of the multiverse. Than that. Yeah.
I was like, guys, anything's happening outside my room. I have to. Yeah, it was one of those moments where I was just like, oh my gosh, guys. Yeah. No.
Oh, it was 15, 16 months talking about that scene.
Like, I think my half an hour was enough for me to just know that. I was like, I think I came and said to you that is a lot. Wow.
But I do think you were super brave in that moment, Paul, when you were just like, yeah, this isn't working for me. I think I think we need to rethink about this. Yeah, and then you guys had that massive meeting all about it, and I thought that was pretty brave of you.
Well, without going down too many roads that I don't want to go down, I mean I do, but I shouldn't. Just with these Marvel projects, when you're editing another type of film or TV show, you have a single storyline. In the Marvel universe, you have all these multiple storylines, and you're part of this bigger picture. Just Being able to wrap your head around all that and keep track of all of that, just the mental overhead that's involved. I mean, do you have to be intimately aware of where you've come from and where the story is going to be going?
To a certain degree, yes, but a lot of those decisions are sort of above our pay grade, really.
Mm-hmm.
But I, for one, enjoy going back and watching all of the films again and having those fresh in my mind and looking for places where we can keep those storylines alive and reference things. That's just fun stuff. That's part of being in a universe. And you rarely, I've rarely gotten the chance to work in a universe like that. That's part of the fun. As far as, what comes after us, it's all pretty top secret. We're pretty quarantined from what's happening in the other shows. Everybody really respects the secrecy of it. It's just not fun if something gets out, and it'll ruin the next 5 movies. So we all kind of keep it tight lips. Once in a while, Kevin Feige on a call will say something about Doctor Strange, or we'll go, ooh, and it's very tantalizing, but you almost don't want to know too much because we're fans.
I think as it was going through, in both Paul's episode where they were doing that Miss Minutes video, and in some of my episodes where we were talking about the possibility of multiverse, say, that there are things that they're focusing on for other shows. You can just tell, you can just feel it.
That's right.
But nothing is ever particularly explicit, I have to say. Like it's like Paul says, the secrecy is very real, and everybody respects it. Nobody asks you questions they shouldn't be asking you if they're on the other shows, and you don't ask those questions. There's a lot of respect for it, actually, I have to say.
Yeah. But I think there's a little bit of a myth of that it's all figured out and it's all mapped out 10 movies in advance. I mean, my sense of it is that there's a general direction of where they want things to go and how they're going to get there. But there is a lot of improvisation along the way, especially at the beginning of this multiverse thing. That's kind of exciting to be on the ground level of that. I mean, the multiverse was born really in episode 6.
Yeah, I was just going to say, usually when, news broke on who'd been cast as this person or that person, that was the first time we were hearing about it. At the same time, we weren't partial to any of that kind of information. And yeah, when the fans heard about something was the first time we would hear about it as well.
It seems like quite often lately in different shows and movies, characters that were considered villains at one time are being revisited and given more depth and dimension to make them more sympathetic and even heroic in their own way. And you realize as you're watching the Miss Minutes cartoon that you're discovering this world along with Loki, and that as an audience, we're aligned with him. Is that a conscious effort for you and the whole team as a means of making it easier for the audience to embrace Loki as a character, or is it just that it all unfolded that way?
Absolutely. I mean, the whole show, especially those first episodes, but really the whole show is from his subjective POV. That is the mode at which we tell this story. It's a narrative storytelling device that helps you identify with your main character.
I'd like to talk a little bit about the framing and the style of the cinematography, because there were things about it that stood out to me and made me wonder how it affected you in any reframing you might have done, or any, performance aside, the angles you might have chosen. And the first thing is that it seemed like we were most often looking up at the characters, that the camera was set low. And if I'm just wrong, we can move on, but if there's something to that, I'd like to hear more about it from you.
I think that was a style choice, or a part of the style of our DP. A lot of those framing choices, as opposed to story-based choices, let's say, where we look down or up on characters sometimes. I think it's part of her framing style. I mean, we were really fortunate to get some stunning shots. We were so lucky, but I think that a lot of what you're seeing on screen are a lot of Autumn's aesthetic.
Well, along those lines, and Calum, strap yourself in because you have a big one coming up, so save up your internet bandwidth.
Oh, great.
But along those lines, something else that stood out to me in the Nexus event, your episode, Emma, was a 2-shot of Mobius and Renslayer having a conversation at the beginning. They're in a profile in a 2-shot. Mm-hmm. But then you cut into close-ups of them, but they're still in profile, almost like it's a reframe of the master 2-shot instead of moving the camera to different angles.
It's 2 different angles, and it's some of the choices. I mean, we have something else like that in episode 4. There's like a tennis match between Loki and Mobius, where we sort of go around them a bit, and then we're in their profile. Definitely for the scene you're talking about with Renslayer and Mobius, it was a wider 2-shot and then 2 single profile shots, and it was a choice that was made through the shoot. And I think it's beautiful. I mean, those scenes are beautiful. You need to feel like those 2 people are in a private, somewhat sneaky conversation, and they need to be aware of who's around them. So one of the best ways to do that is frame them so they're in profile and you can see people walking around in the background. You can see people cross the back of frame, all of that sort of stuff, because we were eavesdropping on something private and quiet, so it was a choice.
All right, Calum.
Here we go. Hit me with it.
I can see your internet level dropping, so I'm a little panicked about asking you this question, but I'm just going to go for it.
I have no idea why it's so bad.
Episode 3, Lamentus, ends with a 3-minute sequence done presumably as a oneer of Sylvie and Loki running towards the ship so they can escape the planet before it blows up. And along the way, they're fighting with people, and clearly this was not shot practically that way. Mm-hmm. But there were several, if not many, many elements stitched together with VFX and camera pans. So, Calum, tell me about the process of putting all that together.
Yeah, I'm not sure I know which shot you're talking about there. It's an absolute phenomenal shot, and I think it maybe even holds the record for MCU longest oneer. So yeah, there's a few stitches in there, hidden here and there. Basically, it was such a massive shoot for that sequence that I would literally get one setup per day on that sequence. So it was a case of Kate running through the dailies for it, picking out her favorite. She usually had a favorite in mind from the shoot, from the day. But, I would send her the selects. She would pick for definite which one she liked, because there was never going to be time to, once the shoot had finished, to come back in and further down the line make a switch to a different take, because it was such a massive shot. So it was very much, they would spend the night shooting. I would get, one set up, maybe 6, 7, 8 takes of it. We would select one, and then it would just go straight to our post-viz team to start stitching them together, basically. And they pretty much worked on that shot right up to when we went, there you go, Disney, there's the episode. It was a long old process, and and her vision of it was an amazing vision, and it didn't really change too much throughout the process of going from post-viz out to the vendors and then working on the shot. It sort of stayed pretty true to her first vision of that sequence.
Do you recall how many setups there may have been in that 3-minute here you go Disney sequence?
I think there could be maybe as many as 6 or 7, something like that. Pretty fixed.
Something else that seemed like it might have been pretty complex to put together was the open in episode 6. All the different quotes from all the Marvel movies from over the years playing out in the open instead of the Marvel fanfare theme song. So, Emma, that was your episode. Tell us a little bit about how all that came together.
I have to say, I had a really great, one of my firsts on the episode, Sarah Bennett, was really actively involved in helping me to put that together. Because when we decided that we were going to do voices through that opening shot, in 6, it was like, what if we do it across the Marvel logo and into the opening? And so it kind of came up and we put in a few voices here and there. And then we brought this to a review, basically. So the other editors were there, VFX was there, we had Marvel, our big team at Marvel there, Kevin, Wright, Kate, Victoria, Kevin, and Lou, all there. And so we all started to talk about what quotes we might like to hear. So it was kind of like a collaborative, what are some of the cool quotes? What does this guy say? What does that guy say? What does this girl say? What do our heroes say at different points throughout the 10 years of films that we could put in here and make feel really exciting and dynamic and interesting? And so Sarah started pulling those all together, and she had a strong hand, I have to say, in where we ended up. It was definitely collaborative, but she laid a groundwork from that initial conversation. And then we started moving things around. We might have switched a few quotes out. When we went to the sound mix, we had our mixer, Danielle. She started to throw in the sound effects of the MCU. So you hear some of the sound effects which are specific to those characters. It wasn't something that we had planned for a long time. It was definitely something that we sort of came to closer to the end of cutting. So it was sort of busy, and it was We had to get it done. We had to get things approved. It was very exciting, I have to say. And when we started laying those voices in and when we started moving them around or budging them and then the sound effects came in, it felt really dynamic and cool and exciting. It was no small task just tracking it all and getting in there. But I have to say that I had help.
But it was one of those ideas that as soon as the idea was mentioned, everybody went, that's gonna be cool. Now we just have to get it done. I hadn't heard the final mix until the episode came out today, Emma. It was so good.
Thank you. Well, I mean, that's why I'm acknowledging the help I had, because it was no small task. All of that whole opening was no small task. So that's, it was definitely a team thing that we were doing. Yeah.
Adding to that, when I did Sex Education with Kate, she was desperately trying to get I Should Be So Lucky by Kylie Minogue into Sex Education. And I was like, no way is that song making it into Sex Education. And then when I heard this, I was like, which I think was actually you, Emma, more than Kate.
I knew that Kylie Minogue story, didn't I? And I'm Aussie. I love her. And as soon as I knew that we were doing like a musical part through that section, as we go through the timeline and stuff, it was like, wow, this is my moment for Kylie Minogue, and Kate loves her too. So, yeah.
Well, while we're talking about audio, music, as in the needle drops, are a very important part of the series. I mean, fans obsess over the meaning behind those particular songs just as much as they would any Easter egg. And I think the first time it really hits you is in Paul's episode, The Variant, the second episode, with Holding Out for a Hero playing over the character that we would come to know as Sylvie, over her fight scene.
Yeah, that particular scene, that went through a lot of different versions. That wasn't a song for a very long time. For a very long time, it was sort of Renaissance fair music inside the tent. The idea was always that there would be a pre-recorded sort of canned show. It would come over the loudspeaker, triggered by the variant. It would cue the Minutemen that something was amiss, so they were being ambushed. And what you would hear, like you do now, was an announcer saying, welcome to the show, et cetera, and have this sort of medieval times was the model for the show. But it would just be like straight Renaissance kind of fair, kind of like battle-y, sort of fun music with a lot more dialogue from the announcer, saying there's a joust happening, now this is happening, all this kind of show stuff. And that lasted for a really long time. And then we started to go in a different direction. And like sometimes happens, you go back to the script. In the script, it said it was a song. And why Holding Out for a Hero? First of all, most importantly, because 1985 is the setting for that scene. And 1985 is Holding Out for a Hero. And Holding Out for a Hero fit the theme of this show that we had come up with, which was a jousting kind of duel for the honor of the maiden kind of thing. And Holding Out for a Hero sort of fit that. And we're in a superhero genre. It says the word hero. And it just really played well. It heightened, it elevated the action and gave the scene something else that was going on. In terms of needle drop, before that, there was, for a very long time, another huge 1985 song that started over the logo and carried through up until they got into the tent. But I have to be a tease. I don't think I can say what song it was. But we couldn't clear it. And we wound up just going with a Renaissance source music approach up until when we get to the tent.
The openings and closings of the episodes, that's also a place, a significant place where needle drops occur. So maybe, Emma and Calum, just pick out one of the ones that you thought was most significant to you and tell us about the circumstances in which you use those songs.
Well, for the end of 3, we had Dark Moon, and that was a Kevin Wright, our producer's choice. He came in one day saying he'd found a great track. He thought it would be perfect for the end. Kate absolutely loved it. We put it on there and it worked really well. And yeah, there wasn't, we didn't try out numerous tracks in there. We kind of went with that one quite quickly. We, had an exec viewing. They seemed to like it. And yeah, it kind of stuck. So there was no trying out bundles of tracks in there. For the Tiki Bar track that we had at the beginning of 3, that was the one that was our troublesome one, where we tried out loads in there. But because it was transitioning as it left the logo into the Tiki Bar, so many tracks were just fighting the dialogue all through the Tiki Bar. So eventually we settled on, I can't think the name of it now, but the track we use just worked really nicely over the transition, and it didn't fight the dialogue throughout. And Kate loves that track. So that was our area for a lot of trying out of stuff before we settled where we were.
At the end of four's there's a lot of heartbreak through the episode, like a lot of heartbreak through 4, as certain characters discover truth about their environment, as we lose certain characters, and, you know, there's a lot of heartbreak in it. So we tried a few different songs at the end, and none of them were quite working. We pitched a few at an executive review, basically, and they weren't working. And then it is about heartbreak, and I think it was Kevin Feige who thought Brenda Lee's If You Really Love Me might be something that goes really nicely there. And as soon as we cut it on, it was sort of beautiful and poetic and sad, and it fit. Just generally, the episode is, you know, there is a lot of moments in there which are kind of upsetting, and it just felt like the right kind of, so it was the right song to end the show with. We tried a few, and as soon as we cut it on, beautiful.
Well, I said fans obsess over these needle drops just like they would Easter eggs. Speaking of Easter eggs, that is such a huge meta part of Marvel properties, something you don't usually have to consider as an editor when working on other shows. I mean, something like The Void in episode 5, where the additional Lokis live, is chock full of Easter eggs in the production design. Does that affect your editing at all in terms of the shots you choose and how long you might stay on a shot, you know, just to make sure the audience is able to take in that Easter egg? Or is it more the case of like, you know, the fans are going to hit pause and study each frame anyway?
You know, these things are obviously very much taken into account. And yeah, there was a good few times where I would hold shots longer in order to accommodate what will be added further down the line. Yeah. So, I mean, I would never hold anything. I was never asked to hold anything beyond where I felt comfortable as an editor, timing wise and things. But certainly there were instances where we gave it a beat longer to make stuff read. But, you know, as you say, the fans are going to pause, you know, numerous times and almost go through frame by frame at times. So they're going to see everything, even if it's on frame.
Yeah, and they're going to post it within an hour of the show airing. They'll figure all of them out instantaneously, is what I've noticed.
Even though you cut the episode, are you ever made aware of an Easter egg by the fans posting something on the internet? So you're like, wow, so that's what that means in that show.
I love that. Yeah, there were a few things that are coming out on the internet now that you're like, oh yeah, I didn't clock that, you know, first time around.
A lot of those ideas are getting sort of snuck in the visual effects design as well. Mm-hmm. I mean, again, to shout out Dan DeLue, I mean, he's making a massive contribution as to what the Easter eggs are. Who he's talking to, I'm not sure, but there's multiple people at Marvel, I can't remember their names, who are in charge of the comic lore. So they drop a lot of comic book, you know, what number Loki first appeared or the TVA first appeared. We sneak those in everywhere. And I don't think any of the editors here, I don't think we made those calls at all. And I don't even think Kate did that. I think Dan DeLue would do that stuff. So sometimes stuff would, you go, what is that? Oh, that's that? Oh, okay. You know, that kind of thing. But in terms of The Void, Calum, didn't Dan also contribute a lot of like what those Easter eggs are?
Yeah. Dan would come up with stuff. Yeah.
Like the ships and stuff like that.
Dan's a big comic guy and he knows that world inside out. And it was him that suggested a lot of their Easter eggs throughout. I don't know if you spotted the Calum Ross Easter egg that's in there.
I did not.
When we got the one shot at the beginning of 5 in where it meets the Lokis down at the bus stop, I made a joke that I don't know if you've interviewed Gary Dolner.
He's on the list, Mr. Fleabag himself.
Yeah. So at the end of Fleabag, it was Dolner Avenue on the bus stop, on the electronic bus that was Dolner Avenue. So I made a joke about, the editor of Fleabag gets his name on there. And then the next day I get this shot arriving and there on the side of the bus was Calum Ross, estate agent or something. and then at one stage, the vegetation had taken over the side of the bus and it could no longer be seen. But Kate was like, Oh no! Can we bring back the writing on the bus? So yeah, there it is. I sort of feel a bit embarrassed by it all.
You should be. Emma, speaking of editors sneaking themselves into episodes, you have an Easter egg, don't you, that I don't think has hit the internet?
Is it my date of birth?
You tell us.
It's my date of... Well, what happened? We needed dates for something for Roxcar, basically. And I got, it was like, we need dates. And I honestly couldn't stop I just screamed out my date of birth. Like, honestly, it's on Mobius's tempad when he's reading the I just screamed it out. I couldn't stop myself. And immediately someone wrote it down, and there it was. I don't know what came over me. Like, we need some dates for this screen. And I was like, yeah, my birthday. Honestly, I couldn't have been, I was so excited.
And then I teased you forever that your first instinct was not to put your husband's date of birth, or something. It was just yours.
Yeah, it was just like, I've got a date. I know a date. It's my date. Yeah.
So we haven't really gotten into ADR at all yet, and you have another interesting Easter egg in regards to ADR, I think, in episode 5, with another Marvel character who appears here as a frog.
I think you can start. Yeah, I think you should take this one, Paul.
Is this where we do the deep dive into... well, the internet seems to call him Throg. We called him Throg a little bit, but mostly we knew him as Frog of Thunder. So I think it came out that that we had a whole scene with the Frog of Thunder, which was originally located in episode 1 in the Time Theater. And it was the first time we go full screen. It was Mobius showing him a scene from his past. It was one that our show Loki had lived through. And it was a short but very funny scene between the Frog of Thunder, voiced by Chris Hemsworth, and Loki, who is anointed himself king. And it got cut, and it was a very visual effects heavy scene. It was very funny. It got cut for pace. It didn't contribute enough to the story to warrant keeping it in, but we did a full record with Chris Hemsworth being very pissed off that Loki has turned him into a frog, and he winds up knocking the shit out of Loki. And it was hilarious, and we were all very sad when it got cut. It was a tough one, but I believe that record was what was used for episode 5. And we couldn't believe it. I mean, Kate included, that we were cutting Chris Hemsworth out of episode 1. I would never have guessed that we would have done that, but it didn't serve the show.
Well, now that the series is over and there's so much talk going on about everyone's reactions to it, one of the things that came out, at least something I read, was that in the production design of The Void, one of the considerations they made was to build the Void so that Tom Hiddleston could do his daily ritual of running really fast around the set, and that he does that every day to get ready. So my question for the three of you is, do you have anything like that? Do you have a ritual or any kind of warm-up routine you do so you can get ready for a day of editing?
Never been asked that question before. Coffee?
Coffee, yeah. When we were in shoot, I would try and get up 4 mornings a week and do 20 minutes of yoga. It's not a lot, but it was enough to sort of make me feel centered, make me feel like I was doing something that wasn't to do with the show or, getting ready to go work on something. So that was something that I tried to do for myself, just 20 minutes of yoga, whether it wasn't necessarily intense, but it was, it was enough so that I could feel like I was doing something for myself every day.
I wouldn't say I have any rituals. I find myself getting into the cutting room, putting down my rucksack, sitting in my chair without even taking my jacket off. And I'll quite often find myself still in that position come lunchtime. So I would not say I have a ritual, not even taking my jacket off.
Calum, what is a rucksack?
Oh, a backpack.
Oh,
there you go.
I'm a single dad of 2 kids, so there is no room in my life to do yoga in the morning. I couldn't do 2 seconds of yoga if you had a gun to my head. So my morning ritual, Matt, is to dash to the edit as fast as I can to make the 9 a.m. Zoom VFX review meeting while shoving coffee down my face and combing my hair with my hands and spit.
Well, that is definitely a contrast to what I just described.
And I do that every single day.
Okay, last question. You've all been good sports. You know, the show is called Loki, but there's so many Lokis, so many different variants of Loki in the show. Which Loki variant do you each most closely identify with? Put another way, if you were a Loki variant, which one would you be?
Sadly, becoming more and more classic Loki every day. I'm going to go with that as my answer.
Well, I mean, I want to say that I know that people are calling the Alligator Florida Loki, and that's where I want to be. Like, to me, I want to be Florida Loki. Like, I kind of love that, right? The alligator? Yeah, it's brilliant.
I hadn't heard that before. By the way, Matt, just to jump in, I find this question about which Loki variant you are to be delightful. It's like when Sex and the City was on, there was a question of, are you a Samantha? It's like, what Loki are you? It's great. I hope it catches on.
Which one? The true Loki.
Oh.
Wow.
The Loki.
Ballsy to go there.
Yeah.
I like how certain you were when you said that, like as if there was anything else. You were nodding your head, like, clearly. I'm the one true Loki. Brilliant.
Yeah.
I still can't believe you said I'm the one true Loki. I thought I was the bloody alligator.
Yeah, those three really need to learn how to have a little fun every now and then. I hope you enjoyed that talk as much, if not more, than I thought you would. I certainly had a good time. Please join me in thanking Emma, Calum, and Paul for making the time for this. I really got into that show, Loki, and being able to talk with the editors behind it is, as it always is, a big treat. Hey, how about you treat yourself to the same editing system behind such groundbreaking series like Loki? It's easy. Download the free trial of Avid Media Composer Ultimate, the official NLE of the TVA, and get started on your next editorial adventure right now. I'll put a link to the trial right there in your TemPad or whatever device you use to listen to this show. Like I said, a double shot of Marvel these past 2 weeks. Who knows what next week holds? Even I don't. But let's get together next week and find out. Until then, this is Matt Fury thanking you for joining me right here on The Rough Cut.